Hey everyone, this is my list of the top 5 classics of American film from the 50s and 60s. This is a period of movies that is full of invention, and it's really what is bridging the gap between the heights of the Hollywood studio system from the 30s, 40s, and early 50s into the revolution that we would see in the 70s. So it's really a bridge period, but we have some of the greatest movies of all time that came out during this period. So let's get started. First on the list is 2001, Space Odyssey.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
So 2001 came out in 1968. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick. It had only one Oscar, that was for visual effects. It made $146 million, and it is ranked number 15 on AFI's list of top 100 movies.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Hal? 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 Hal?
Even if you haven't seen this movie, you're familiar with significant parts of it, from the opening images and music to the climax where we have the evil ship's computer Hal, so that even if you haven't seen it, you know it from the parodies, from just the way it's influenced modern cinema and modern sci-fi. But what is really extraordinary about it is it's just a huge leap forward in terms of science fiction and special effects. I would say that this is probably the first photorealistic sci-fi movie that I am aware of. It is set the standard, and it really, we wouldn't have a Star Wars without 2001. And so just for that alone, it's a towering achievement. But Stanley Kubrick, who is famous for his attention to detail and his almost OCD need to control everything that we see on screen, it's really to great effect in this movie. But it's also a movie that really makes you think. It's not clear cut. It's ambiguous. It's experimental. There's things that I still don't understand what the movie is trying to say, but I really like that it's raising those questions and it's challenging the viewer, and it's doing more than just telling a really interesting story that's easy to be engrossed with, but it's also introducing ideas and forcing you to reckon with them. Next up is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Well, the way I figure it, we can either fight or give. If we give, we go to jail.
I've been there already.
But if we fight, they stay right where they are and starve us out. Or go for position, shoot us. Might even get a rock slide started and get us that way. What else can I do?
They could surrender to us, but I wouldn't count on that.
Butch and Sundance came out in 1969. It was directed by George Roy Hill. It won 4 Oscars, but not for Best Picture or Director. It made $102.3 million at the box office, and it is ranked number 73 on AFI's list. Obviously way too low.
You? All right. I'll jump first.
No.
Then you jump first.
No, I said.
What's the matter with you?
I can't swim!
Why, are you crazy? The fall will probably kill you.
What can I say about this movie? If you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it as soon as possible. It is pure enjoyment, and I can't imagine anyone would watch this movie and not end it with a smile on your face. Well, maybe some tears too because of the way it ends, but it is a movie that rests upon the pure charisma of the two leads, and it is, I think, probably the quintessential buddy movie. There is no acting duo that I would rather watch on screen, and I'm fairly certain there's only 2 movies that Paul Newman and Robert Redford were in together. I don't think they were both in The Sting 2. Were either of them? I don't actually know. Please let me know in the comments. But it's just a tragedy that they were not in more movies together. If you love George Clooney and Brad Pitt and you think that they are like the definition of movie stars, you will realize that, oh, they are just pale imitations of Robert Redford and Paul Newman. It's quite simply one of the greatest movie pairings of all time. I don't know if this movie invented the idea of the lovable outlaw, but it's certainly the pinnacle of the lovable outlaw, and you just can't help but fall in love with these characters. But there's one other thing that I need to point out, and this is a weird movie, and it has iconic scenes and iconic moments, but then it has like a musical number in the middle of it with the raindrops keep falling on my head. Where did that come from? It's definitely something you could only get in the 60s, and I love it. I'm here for it, and I am pretty certain that you will be too. Next on the list, Lawrence of Arabia.
What are they now?
Anywhere within 300 miles of Medina. They are Hashemite veterans. They can cross 60 miles of desert in a day.
Oh, thanks, Dryden. This is going to be fun.
Lawrence, only 2 kinds of creature get fun in the desert. Bedouins and gods, and you're neither. Take it from me.
Lawrence of Arabia came out in 1962. It was directed by David Lean. It won a whopping 7 Oscars, including for Best Picture and Best Director. It made $70 million at the box office, and it is ranked number 7 on AFI's list of top 100. You can describe this movie in one word: epic. There is probably no better example of an epic Hollywood drama than Lawrence of Arabia. And it is another example of a movie that even if you watch it today, it's still something that is going to be gripping and you're going to be amazed by it. But at the time when this movie came out in the early 60s, it was, there was no other movie like it. Most movies to this date, even the Hollywood epics, the Roman epics, they were made in studios. They were made, you know, if not in Hollywood, near Hollywood, in the Arizona desert, wherever it was. This was the first movie that transported you to another part of the world, but in a realistic way, not in a Wizard of Oz way. This was a movie that showed you a part of the world in beautiful, colorful detail. On top of that, you have this amazing performance by Peter O'Toole, this epic story. It's long. There's no doubt that it's long, but I encourage you all to, the first chance you get, go see this movie in a movie theater. Even if you've seen it before, you will not understand the amazing nature of this movie until you see it in the theater in 70 millimeter with a it's just an experience that you'll never forget. Next up, On the Waterfront.
I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know, Charlie. That's what I want to talk to you about. Listen, Terry, you know how much those piers are worth that we control through the local? I know that. All right, you think that Johnny's going to jeopardize the whole setup for one rubber-lipped ex-tanker who's walking on his heels? What the? Been better. That's not the point. I could have been a lot better, Charlie. The point is we don't have much time. I'm telling you, I haven't made up my mind yet. Well, make up your mind before we get to 437 River Street.
On the Waterfront came out in 1954. It was directed by Elia Kazan. It won 8 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor. It made $9.6 million, and it is ranked number 19 on AFI's list.
I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. Instead of a bum, which is what I am. Let's face it.
This movie is on this list for one reason and one reason only, and that is acting. This is the movie that really transitions us from the classical Hollywood style of acting to the modern style of acting. And it's really got one foot in each side. If you don't watch a lot of Hollywood movies, or you're a little turned off about it, one reason is probably because those classic Hollywood movies, those black and white movies, they all have a very heightened acting style that's not natural, and you actually see it parodied in movies today, like the movie Mank or other movies that are trying to capture the classic Hollywood feel, where the dialogue is read in a very quick clip style, and it doesn't have the same naturalism that we expect from movies today. And while this movie still has some of that heightened acting, it's also the one that's taking us into something new, into this new method style of acting, a more naturalistic style of acting. And this movie is really the one that takes us there. And Marlon Brando is the actor that takes us there. And because of that, it's become iconic. It's an iconic role. We probably all know, even if you haven't seen it, you know I could have been a contender. That is embedded in our movie history, and it's all because of Marlon Brando. And so it really just encapsulates that transition from the classic form of acting to what we think of as acting today. And finally, Rear Window.
Well, she picked the most prosperous looking one.
She's not in love with him, or any of them.
How can you tell that from here?
You said it resembled my apartment, didn't you?
Rear Window came out in 1954. It was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It won 0 Oscars, although it was nominated 4 times. It made $36.8 million at the box office, and it is ranked number 48 on the AFI list.
The available transportation. You don't sleep very much, you bathe less. And sometimes the food that you eat is made from things that you couldn't even look at when they're alive.
Jeff, you don't have to be deliberately repulsive just to impress me. I'm wrong.
Deliberately repulsive? I'm just trying to make it sound good. You just have to...
I obviously couldn't have this list and not include a Hitchcock movie, and it was a tough decision which movie to put on here, because I think the critical consensus is Vertigo is the movie that should be on the list. It's usually higher ranked on the top lists of movies of all time, sometimes the number 1 movie. But not only is Rear Window the movie I enjoy more, I actually think it's the superior movie. It is the more complete movie. So if you don't know Rear Window, it is set entirely inside this New York City apartment where Jimmy Stewart is confined because he's broken his leg, and while he's stuck in his wheelchair looking out the window in this very hot summer, he may or may not have seen a crime committed in the apartment across the courtyard. And in classic Hitchcock fashion, the suspense really ramps up, and it's a tight thriller. I think it's really groundbreaking in its sensibility, and the way that Hitchcock, who obviously is known as the master of suspense, and that's on full display here, really sets a challenge for himself by confining the whole movie to this one location, and playing with all of the different ways of using the camera and using this confined set to create suspense, to create tension, and really build towards that climax. And so I think that Rear Window is the predecessor to movies like Die Hard, for example, an action movie that's set entirely in one building, but Hitchcock was doing it in the early 50s. And of course, I do have to point out that it also is anchored by these amazing performances by Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly, two of our greatest movie stars of all time. You will not be able to watch this movie and not come away from it without falling in love with it, either one or both of them, and just you will really enjoy this movie. So that's it for my list of the top American classics from the 50s and 60s. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you disagree with the list or you have other movies you wish I included, mention them in the comments. I'll be happy to respond. But thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Raindrops keep falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling. So I just did me.